Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Late Drop presented by Futures. From 1 foot, 60 foot, Futures has you covered. They are the gold standard of fins. They're the fins of choice that I use and many other big wave surfers in the world. So support them because they support us and ride Futures. Today's guest needs no introduction. He's young superstar Kai Lenny. We get into his recent swell trip to Nazare. We also talk about his new web series with Red Bull TV called The Life of Kai. I had a great time chatting with the young man. I hope you enjoy it.
I always get the first wave.
Pretty much, it brought me to tears. Like, the wave was so good.
That's the biggest drop I've ever taken in my life.
And so right there, I told myself I needed to just relax and stay calm, that I'm stronger than this.
Well, Kai Lenny, the superstar himself, thank you for joining The Late Drop, my man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamie. Super stoked to be on with you. This is awesome.
Yeah. So I guess first things first, I'd like to how was that Nazare swell you guys went over for? Like to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, the whole world saw the content and the footage and stuff, but was that the biggest that you've seen it so far?
Yeah, I think that was definitely the biggest waves I've seen at Nazare for sure, and maybe some of the tallest waves I've ever seen. You know, when we first drove down to the harbor early that morning, the waves were breaking farther out than I had ever seen. And it was pretty remarkable because it still felt like the place could hold way bigger. Like, it was just tapping into that big mama wave. And I just had this feeling that this wave must have gotten way bigger before and probably will get bigger in the future. But up to that point, you know, I think a lot of people didn't know where to sit because it was pure towing that day. I just noticed all the jet skis. Everyone was sort of like not sure where to be because the normal lineup was different. We were actually like more in the channel for that big mama section, and even the left coming off of that was like past first peak. It was like, I don't even know what you would call that, like half peak or something. But it was pretty crazy. It was crazy though how fast the swell came down too. Like, it was like, for sure, at the night before was 100 feet, and then come the next day it was like only 6 to 8 feet. So the come down was just massive. I thought it was going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, because I wondered there was no. It looked like there was no. I didn't see any photos or footage of anyone trying to paddle. So I'm guessing that just like you said, it just went down so fast that was it.
Yeah, like even that afternoon, from the morning to the afternoon, it was already dropping really fast, but people were still towing because it was still at that size where a crazy big one out the back would come in. And I think that's what kind of like didn't motivate anybody to paddle. And then Lucas and I were thinking about paddling the next day, like, oh, it could still be 25 feet. And then we took the ski out there and it was literally only 8 feet. And it was really weird because we were kind of looking at each other as, how could it go from 100 feet to 8 feet in less than 12 hours from like the other day. So that was pretty crazy. But I just wish that swell had hit in the morning versus in the middle of the night, just because I think it would have been crazy to see how much bigger it actually was.
Yeah, you know what's really funny is that the Hercules swell did the exact same thing. So when we were at Belhera waiting that day, that night, it was already on the way down and it was giant. But you knew that through the night it would have been. I mean, I don't even like saying 100 feet, but guaranteed,
Yeah.
like what you see the day of and what you know that was like through the night, you're just like, wow, like I wish I could just have night vision goggles and just see how big it would have been like through the middle of the night, because the two of the biggest storms in the last decade have peaked at night, which is a real shame.
Yeah, it's so 50-50, right? Like 50% it could come in the night and then 50% it could come during the day. I I, I agree, like saying 100 feet's hard, but I also think that um, waves have been maybe not measured as big as they truly are. And it's like, how do you even measure a big wave truly? Because it's like a lot of it is like the lens somebody has, the angles. But I think in person, when you're watching some of these waves, you're like, gosh, like if that's not 100 feet, I don't know what it is. Because every time I've ever been to a big city and I look up and look at a 10-story building, which is 100 feet, go, gosh, I swear I've seen waves that big. And I've seen people like take off on waves that big. But if I was considering that it was that big during the day, that's why I thought, oh, the night before it must have been crazy big, because literally in the harbor, and when you come into where the jet skis are and you're driving down that road and there's that little glimpse between the harbor, the waves are
Yeah.
breaking past that opening. And previously, like the contest in February, last February, it was breaking kind of like way farther in from there. And that was still a giant day. I mean, Maya broke the women's record with that giant wave. And, it just seemed like it was, the water was, even the current inside the harbor was moving. And I remember Carlos Brule actually telling me he'd never seen that much current in there, even on that big Hercules day. Because I asked him, like, how does this compare already? And he's like, well, I've never seen the current move like this in here. And that's when my heart sort of dropped, because we were only just going out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too, because as you are going out through that river mouth, it has that little stationary wave feel to it, where you get that reverse current and you see little waves stacking up. And yeah, the day that I saw like that as well was the day that Francisco and Rodrigo's Coxo got their waves as well, and that was the only time that I've seen that thing like regurgitating through the river mouth. So I guess that's the tell sign. If you see it's doing some reverse current through the mouth as you're heading out on the jet ski, you know it's going to be giant.
Yeah, totally.
What was it like? Well, I mean, take us through the session. Were you tying with Lucas, Lucas or Carlos? You guys teamed up together?
Well, so when it gets really big, your team just continues to grow, because it's like you need backups for backups, and especially at Nazare. And Lucas and I, we were going to team up in the beginning, but then we just decided we wanted to catch as many waves as possible, because we knew the swell was going to peak kind of like, or it already had peaked and it was coming down. So he towed with his other partner Ian, and then I towed with Carlos. And Carlos was like, I'll get one wave later on, but I just want to tow you guys. And I was like, okay, sweet. That's awesome. But the thing is, we pulled out the back, and that's like I explained earlier, all the skis were in such a weird position. It took like even Carlos and I like 20 minutes to figure out, okay, well, like, where is the wave coming? Like, we saw a couple big mama peaks, but when you're looking at it from behind, it was hard to see where it was like lining up, because in some way it did feel messy. But then once you figured out what waves were good, it was like very organized. It was just like kind of showing up to a new break and not knowing what's going on or what's the good ones to go on. And, with Nazare too, it's not the farthest outside waves that are the best. A lot of times you'd see somebody towing into a wave that looked gigantic. It was like 100-foot swell, and then it would just never break, and it would just keep going, or it would come down. And, watching guys like the people who got in the rhythm, I think the fastest was like just, Sebastian and Maya, and then Lucas and Ian. I noticed that they were going for the inside ones. And I just remember towing with Lucas last time, like, okay, the inside ones are always the tallest, even though they look like insiders. It's the most weird sort of like opposite of what you would imagine. And then I just remember catching a really big left, and it was just really bumpy, and it was, backside out there. You can't tell where you're going because there's no wall like a traditional wave. It's just such a huge pyramid, and having that whitewater just tap into your back, like, it was just really an interesting day. It took me a while to sort of warm up, but I think where things felt the most real wasn't even when I was on a wave, was actually when Carlos and I swapped, and I'm like, okay, I'll catch you a wave. And I towed him into a wave that was so big, but it just ended up not breaking. And I remember he kicked out, and I was like coming on the ski, and I looked behind, and I think to this day, it was, well, for sure to this point, the biggest wave I'd ever seen break behind. It just seemed like twice as big as anything I've been in front of. And I remember going, okay, this is going to have to be the best pickup of all time. And it was funny though, because our spotters couldn't see the lineup very well. And because there was such big waves, it actually created like a salt fog over the cliff.
Yeah.
And we were kind of cold and in the dark at that point. And I remember Carlos just being like, oh, this one. And it looked good, but we had no idea the next one was twice as big and actually was going to break. And I remember if I didn't pick up Carlos, it probably would have been the worst experience of his life. And I'm like, even when I got him on the ski and we were going, we had a lot of time between. The wave was catching us so fast. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like if I go faster, I might lose Carlos on the back of the sled, because that whitewater was like just so big. And we were just aiming towards the trench, that channel. because we were all the way onto the right. And it was just that one image of like looking back and just seeing the way the whitewater was. It just seemed on another level. It's hard to describe, kind of.
Yeah, it's hard to describe unless you haven't been there, and that's I think that I've said it a million times. It's until you've been there and you've been in the water, and I know how it looks like a mush burger. You can see it, right? You can see it, but you don't realize that how big that actual top to bottom is before it actually breaks and then goes another 40, 50 feet. Like it's a 40 to 50 foot top to bottom wave, and then it hits and rolls another 40 to 50 feet. It's radical. And like you said, the wave that you got, that nice right that you got in the contest, when you look at that and you look at where Lucas pulled you in, like there was all the guys were out the back waiting for bigger wave. And those waves that come in and keep the energy and don't cap out the back, I feel the ones that come in and then when it hits the inside does do that pyramid jack and actually look the tallest. To me, unless you get big mama that's legit one that breaks, because like that Coddy's wave and that, they're giant, and then you look and you're like, oh, and it happens all the time, and you're like, oh, it's just it barely broke, like it's such a big lump of water. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's so scary and gnarly, but like, how's that thing look 100 feet and then it barely breaks? Like, or it'll just be breaking as it's kicking out into the channel, but you're like, if you see the image of that person, that girl or guy in that wave, you're like, that thing is massive. Like, it's giant.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's such a weird experience because, I mean, I think a lot of people back in the day especially wrote it off as a mush burger, but then you go there and you experience it, and it's so different than other big waves. And in my experience, you go to a place like Jaws or Mavericks or any wave that hits kind of a reef bottom, a shelf, and the wave's moving really fast out at sea, and then it kind of hits the bottom and stacks. And then the speed you get from riding, it's actually across the wave versus like forward. Whereas Nazare, it doesn't ever lose its speed. It just seems like it goes faster and faster and faster, like almost as if when it breaks, it finally lets go of that energy. And that whitewater is just, you can't even stand up against it. Like if it taps you, it's game over. And I had like my biggest wave that day was his right. And it was like still kind of that mush burger because it was like, I think barely breaking on Big Mama. But I can remember once that whitewater touched me, it was just vaporized me at the end. And I was like almost in the channel, but it just vaporized me. There was no like fighting it like some other big waves where that energy kind of shoots out and then relaxes and then shoots out again. It was just like getting ran over. And, all my training I thought I did was going to pay off in the summer. Couldn't have like, it didn't help the way I thought it might have if I got hit by that whitewater. And then eventually, like when I went left and I had my GoPro and I was just trying to get a couple GoPro clips because my thoughts were, I just want to like get a couple shots of what it might feel like to surf a wave out here. And then I ended up falling and getting pounded. That was just like, I tried to ride that wave as safe as possible. Like if you watch the land angle, I wasn't taking any risks by going super deep because, I had a pole in my hand and I'm like, yeah, I'll just get a couple shots and then I'll drop the pole and I'll go deeper and really focus on making it. But that wave just peels outwards like that. And sometimes you could be on the shoulder and it still will get you.
And what is it the fastest you've ever gone on the surfboard, do you think, out there?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Go for sure the fastest I've gone. That right. I can remember, and it felt like the biggest wave I have ever ridden. I'm not sure if it like actually looks it, but the one thing that I noticed was that I had this big right and it was like Sebastian went left. And I remember seeing Garrett McNamara at the bottom driving a jet ski. Like he was getting caught inside as a safety ski. And, at that point he had to go left or right and he decided to go left. And I remember just initially dropping in and like yelling out to Garrett, like, woohoo, like this is insane. Like as I passed his wake and then all of a sudden like locking into speed I haven't felt. And just luckily trusting my board could handle it. I was skipping faster than I'd ever gone. And it could have been because I was on this right going into this channel and there was all this kind of like current coming up it. So it could have given me that illusion. But these waves that day just seemed like they were moving a little bit quicker. And I also think because they weren't focused in on like first peak or second peak, which is way inside, they were so far out. They had that open ocean swell feeling. Like, if you do a downwinder and you get on one of those big, like
Yeah.
15-foot swells in the channel. They feel so fast because they're just kind of traveling. It had that same feeling. And I think that's why a lot of these big mama waves weren't breaking top to bottom, even though they were like super steep. They were almost like outrunning the way they were breaking. And then I think, that wave, like I said, the night before, for sure, it was like way bigger. And it reminds me of like Hugo Val's wave a couple years ago, where that thing was actually top to bottom big mama. So, that one wave where Carlos and I were, driving away on the jet ski, that one broke top to bottom at Big Mama. And I think that was
Yeah.
one of only a couple that broke. And it was just really bizarre too, not to see somebody on it. Like nobody surfed the left or the right of that wave.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking like, why wasn't anybody on that wave? Like, I wish I was on that wave, but why wasn't anyone there? And I think because it just broke in another place out in the ocean, like a little farther out, and nobody like had anticipated it. Because already
Yeah.
people had moved more in front of First Peak for those lefts. And that was around the same time Lucas got his giant left. That was a closeout.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just the visions, as a surfer, and you feel like certain sessions, you're like, wow, man, like that was really gnarly and giant and huge, and the photos or the footage mightn't make it feel like that. But being in the water is really the only test. Like just that gut feeling that you have, and it's like those days at Jaws, right? The El Nino year when obviously the Aaron Gold day, like the waves were giant and they looked super tall, but like even the morning after and those double days, like some of the size of those waves, like picture wise, weren't much bigger than other swells that we see all the time. But there was something about the energy of those El Nino years, like the intervals, and just when they were coming on, back to back swells, that you can't feel it unless you're out in the water and you're feeling it and you're seeing it and you just like feel that energy and feel how fast the ocean's moving. Like you really can't get a gauge of what it is from the land or from a photo or from a video.
Yeah, no, there's like this weird thing where I feel like when waves get to a certain size, maybe they stop going vertically and they stack with energy. And then if it's bigger than that, then they start getting tall again. Like it's like this weird, like tall, stack with energy, get tall again, like these stages. Because I mean, talking with you about like the 2016, I felt like Jaws was like, it wasn't getting taller anymore. It was just getting like thicker and like folding on itself. Like gravity was stopping it from going upward. So that was it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. And I did think of you when we were out at Nazare, because I know you're always keen to just paddle the biggest waves ever paddled. And I was thinking about like, could you catch one out here right now? And I think for sure you could. The problem was just like maybe getting caught inside. Like you'd almost have to do like a step off where like you're on a ski and you're like, okay, this is the position, jump off and like then go for it. Because like that whole thing with Carlos was like literally I thought we were out in the middle of the ocean, like a mile outside the point. And when he kicked out of this wave that didn't even break, there was like 100-foot wave behind it. And because I had a couple people as well being like, well, why didn't you think of paddling? I'm like, well, it's not so much like not wanting to try to paddle a wave so tall. It's just the consequences around trying to do that. Like you're going to get caught. It's just inevitable on a day like that. And so,
I think that there comes a point where you have to really, what's it worth to you? What's the ego? Look, I'm going to take a step back, because the Mavericks contest in 2010, just talking about swells and how they move and how they, like that swell was a really interesting numbers. Like it was 21 feet at 17 seconds, right? So it had a really high swell height, but the period wasn't so big, but they were catching makeable waves off the second shelf there, right? And it was bad. That's the one that Dorian in the morning was getting barreled, right? So like to me, like out of all the stuff that I've seen, like to me, I think that's the best paddleable swell that I've seen at Mavericks. And it was the way the numbers were, right? So not a high period, so it wasn't sort of folding on itself. It actually, the swell height was high enough. The period wasn't too high, and maybe that was just a magic number that let it all just come to a point where it wasn't folding on itself, losing energy, but it was big enough just to catch the second reef, and you've got a perfect number, right? And maybe there's a perfect number at Jaws, and maybe there's a perfect number at Nazare, but look, there was a few years back, I went out one day in the morning and with Hugo, Garrett, Cotty, and I tried to paddle like first peak, mate, like somewhere out there, maybe even a little deeper. And I got so hung up in the lip and just like disintegrated. And I just, after that, I was just like, you know what? I don't want anything to do with this, really. Like it's so hard, like to be in the spot, to position yourself, paddling out there. It's like Belhera. You honestly just have to be lucky. There's no skill. I don't care who you are. There's no skill about it. You can be in the realm of a paddle wave, and even when it's perfect at Nazare, like contest-sized paddle, like I like the waves that aren't first peak and aren't second peak, that are inside. There's a wedge right that's like a 1.5 peak.
Yeah.
But, it's to think that that spot, or to think that you could paddle out to Big Mama, and if one wave breaks in 7 hours, to think that you're going to be in the right spot to get that wave. I mean, hey, maybe someone will get lucky, but the risk versus reward to me, when I try and think about that, is just, and the risk that you're putting on your rescuers, that if you were to get caught there inside and then you're not far enough to the channel, and then now you're getting sucked, towards the rocks, and oh man, it makes my skin shiver when I think about it.
Well, you brought up a good point with like the swell period, because I noticed like the best paddle sessions that I've ever had and the best consistent wave riding I have seen from people like at a Jaws has been on a smaller period but a bigger swell. And then as soon as you get into that like 18 to 20 second interval, there's a lot of waves unridden because they're just folding so hard. And it's just like, it's not necessarily that you can't get in, but it's just like, where are you going to go after you get in? And then, thinking about Mavericks as well, I think it was like a couple years ago, I think Chumbo and maybe it was Luca and Hotman, and it was that giant day out there. I don't know, were you out there that day? The one day that was like rolling through?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, that day was I don't remember what the numbers were on that day. They had a small window, but yeah, Pete Mel, and then they got caught by a second reef one rolling through. But yeah, I'm a true believer in that there's special numbers, and like we always see a lot of those like 12 at 20 or 11 at 18 at Jaws. Like there's a lot of the small wave height, big periods, which still make Jaws insanely big. But, I'd really love to see a 17 at 17 or a 20 at 16. Like it's been a while. Like what would that look like again? Like, would that be just really makeable waves, but the height, like the height gets higher. It's not moving as fast as a 22nd. It's more approachable. Maybe it's starting to do more of the thing up the north point there. Who knows? But it'd be interesting to get something like where the numbers are more even, like the swell height and the period height are more leveled out than sort of just one way or the other.
Well, remember when Shane kind of got that crazy barrel at the end of the day? It was like that 2-day swell where I think it was like the whole world sort of converged on Pe'ahi. I just remember that period, it seemed like it was a little less. And that just like, it got rid of that kink that Jaws sometimes has, because like Jaws will have that like double up so you can get in, but then you're dealing with this knuckle. And then you might end up in that knuckle going in the air or getting sucked up. And it was just like, watching some of that footage again, like Shane was able to get into these super big, tall waves, but it just didn't have that kink. And then he was able to set up like a toe style barrel. And was like, oh, that's pretty crazy. So I've thought about that. It seems like I was actually having this discussion with my brother the other day that I think we've been spoiled the last few years with big wave surfing. Like I remember now as a kid being here on Maui, and it reminds me of this season where there wasn't one swell. It was just windy and rainy and kind of crappy surf the whole year. And I remember now that there wasn't even 1 year, it was like more frequently. And just coming off that crazy run of that big wave paddling, the start of that big wave paddling era with like the 2011, paddles days at Jaws up till like, the contests at Nazare and stuff. It just seems like there was an era where there was always really good big waves. And I'm just concerned that the next few years, maybe we're going into a drought, but at the same time, I'm hopeful that it's only the beginning of this season.
Well, and the great thing, well, hopefully, if this, if they ever let up on these restrictions with Corona, but the beauty is that, La Nina it's great for Europe, it's great for the Atlantic, and, there's still been pumping waves over there, and they've, so they're scoring right now, so that's the beauty of being able to, I guess, jump on a plane and, if in a perfect world, if I had, all the time and the money to like this year without everything going on, I probably would have went and posted up in Europe for the first half, basically.
Yeah.
Just because I've seen it before. I've seen it before where you just know that, Europe loves it, and it's that great time of year, September, October, November, before the storms come in too harsh there and gets too cold and windy. But here's crossing our fingers that, looks like there's the Pacific starting to, light up a little bit at the moment. There's a few storms up there. Jet stream's not quite pointed towards us so good, but, the West Coast might get a few waves here and there. But, yeah, maybe we just have to think after Christmas we're going to get some.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I also want to go back to Mavericks. I didn't get it last season. Did you get over there last season at all?
Did I? I think I did, but it was, it wasn't. There wasn't really anything special or anything that anyone missed, I don't think. So,
yeah, no, it just seems like, even just thinking back to Nazare, like I wanted to stay there, but I had to like go back to, I actually had to do a trip to Tahiti for a photo shoot for Hurley. And I just remember when I was leaving, though, it was like some of the best sandbars I've seen out there. Cause that sand is actually really far out early in the season, and come the end of the season, it's away. But I was just figuring, I was like, oh, this place is probably going to be really good paddling on one of these, like, no one's going to be paying attention to these smaller swells after, the most colossal big one had come in many years. So it could just be like, some of the best beach break ever out there. Because it's actually like every wave was barreling. I can only imagine, even if it was 15 to 20 feet, it's going to maybe like become more like Jaws in terms of every wave's like a barreling versus kind of a survival avalanche. So yeah, I'm keen on going back there. If things aren't looking up, I'm going to try to wiggle my way back to Europe.
Yeah. Didn't they banned it, right? After you guys with the massive crowds, didn't they ban surfing at Nazare or something like that?
Well, yeah, that was the most interesting thing, is I've never seen that many people on the cliff in my life out at Nazare. I think maybe the closest I've seen it was the tow contest, but especially the first event out there that you won. That seemed like it was like that type of crowd where, and later on I found out that crowd was like 30,000 people on the cliff. And actually, just talking to my brother who was on the cliff as a spotter, initially he couldn't get down to go do that. And apparently there was a roadblock like right at that entrance, where they either let you drive your car down or you have to park to the left. At the very top there, apparently there was thousands of people, and there was like 3 cops like, no, you can't go. Like, and then one person like charged one side, and the cops all ran to stop him. And then everyone ran the opposite and just filled the cliff up. And there was like 30,000 people. And, I could definitely see why they were concerned. I hadn't heard if anyone got like, if it was like a super spreader COVID event. But then when I heard that it was like, banned, I was like, oh, that is the worst feeling ever. Imagine if you're a local there, And that's a bummer too, because I wanted to go back at some point. But I've kind of heard that they're letting it slide a little bit because it's been small, so guys can go and surf and no one's interested to view it. But I think the test is going to be if a big swell comes, and then everyone like wants to go see the big swell if they're going to just bar the harbor, because if they don't open the harbor, you're screwed.
Yeah, and it's the yin and the yang of over there. So the government, the mayor Walter, they love it and they want to promote it, and it's a great economy boost for Nazare, and but then you have the, everything else that goes with that, so they're in a tough spot. But either way, it's a one of the most it's a seventh wonder of the world for surfing. Whether you like the wave or not, whatever, it's just going there and seeing it from the top of that cliff. It feels like you're back in Game of Thrones days, like
It
with
feels
drag.
biblical.
It feels biblical,
Yeah.
and so yeah. But hey, I obviously want to talk about Life of Kai. I've been watching those episodes. Congratulations on that. But
Thank you.
I'd like to start from the beginning and sort of end at how it's got to Life of Kai. Kai Lenny, from growing up in Maui as a Grom to now having a series, from Red Bull based on your life. It's a pretty cool story. So, I think your story's been told a lot, but I mean,
Yeah.
let's just start from the start. You were born in Maui, but your dad and your mum were from different areas and converged. I think they met windsurfing, or I'm not sure, but how did that all start for you?
Yeah, so like over here on Maui, it attracted my parents. They were from California originally. Well, my mom moved all over America because her dad was in the Air Force, but my dad was from Santa Barbara. Pretty much came from nothing, and they basically met here on Maui after my dad moved here to come windsurfing with his pals. And he was working, dishwasher at Mama's Fish House, which is like that nice restaurant up the
Yeah.
coast. And my mom had come out here, and her sister was running a company, like, or her my mom came out, and her sister was a friend of somebody who started J Crew. And so they asked my mom, hey, when you're out there, if there's some cool spots to like do a photo shoot for J Crew, can you let us know? And my mom's like, yeah, absolutely. And Mama's Fish House was, of course, a really amazing spot. And at that point, my dad had already worked his way up from dishwasher to manager, and then so they kind of met. And I remember my parents told me they both shared the interest in windsurfing, and they both surfed as well. But my dad at the time didn't know that. And so the day they made a date to go windsurfing, there was no wind, ironically, on the windiest place in Hawaii. And then so she suggested to go surfing. And that's when my dad fell in love with her, because, he started surfing, before windsurfing. And so, many years. And my mom became a doctor. Well, she was a doctor, but became a doctor here on Maui at Kaiser. And then my dad continued to run Mama's Fish House. And my brother and I came along. And I just remember as a kid, we kind of were just always on their program, which was the best program, because if they weren't working, it was trying to spend time on the water. And so they were very busy people. And a lot of time we were like stuck at after school programs until like 5 or 6. But on certain days, they would pick us up right after school, and we would go either surfing or go down to the beach and go windsurfing. And I can remember having like a definitive choice, like I could play in the sand or I can like learn how to do these sports. And I always didn't like getting sandblasted here because it's so windy, that I just decided to pick that up. And then, as time sort of progressed, my brother and I were, I think, born in the right time at the right place to see a lot of emerging sports, and by individuals such as Dave Kalama, like Robbie Nash, Rush Randall, Laird, and many others. And then, the whole pro and paddleboarding scene, which is when I first heard of you, and you started coming over here and doing the local races as a warm up before the big Molokai. I mean, it just seemed like at every point in the year, there was some sort of world championship event that was attracting people from everywhere. And so as a kid, my mind was pretty much occupied the entire time of the year, because there was always some sort of like sport or person to like look forward to seeing, or just watching them out on the water. And that was just hugely inspirational for me. But I guess the earliest memory I ever had of a wave, and bless it be my favorite spot in the world today, is Jaws. I just remember a big swell and my dad taking us down to the cliff just to watch. And we knew Dave and Laird and those guys just because my parents knew. It's a small island. We all lived on the North Shore. But I just remember thinking it was larger than life, and what are the chances that this wave is breaking in front of me? And so I kind of became semi-obsessed with the wave and them. And, as a kid, highly impressionable. I just wanted to be like my mentors and then impress them if I could.
Yeah. So this is not many people might know this, but your middle name is Waterman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's super. That's it's really interesting to me because that means that your dad, like, how long was it before like your mum and dad met, and they'd been in Maui before you were born?
Like only I think a couple years before I was born, but it's funny
Yeah.
because my middle name is actually a family name. I like crazy enough. It
Huh.
comes from it's my great grandmother's maiden name was Waterman. It wasn't Wasserman, like I guess of German descent, but it was actually Waterman. And so like part of me wishes like, oh man, I wish that name would have like been my last name because it would have been cool. But I'm gonna rep the Lenny name as well, of course. But my great grandmother was Waterman. And so my dad, like when he grew up in Santa Barbara, in a surfing culture with a bunch of surfing pals, and then with windsurfing emerging, and then of course them moving out here because they saw what the watermen of Hawaii were doing. I think he always felt like, gosh, that would be the coolest middle name for one of my kids when I have them. And so that's how I sort of inherited that name. It wasn't like they were, you know, destining me to become a waterman of any kind. They just were like, hey, first kid is going to get this name because it's just too cool to like let disappear. And
Yeah.
so that's how that name came to be
Okay.
honest.
That's good. Good clarification because I'm like, wow, like I'm wondering, like, geez, your dad like took a lot of guts to just go, hey, he's gonna be a
Yeah.
he's gonna be a waterman, and I don't care what he does, But that makes sense that it's that the name was in the family, and obviously, yeah, that makes total sense. So that's
Yeah.
cool because I'd always wondered, I knew that was it, and I was like, wow, I wonder like how that came about. So I'm glad you're able to clarify that for us. That's
I
cool.
think if it was forest, I wouldn't have been into the water at all. But I think too, like my parents, they never forced Ridge and I to go in the water. But I think when you were a kid, like back in like maybe the 90s, the phones and social media didn't exist. So like when we were bored, we literally had to just play with our imagination. And there was no like, let's look at the phone, let's see what's going on. It was more.
Speaking of phones.
Speaking of phones, it's always listening. No, so I think, and then also too, I think it's clear. It's really important to remember we were very motivated by the best in the world individuals coming here. Like Maui at one era was like the hot spot for like 5 different sports. So like you know, I don't know. It just seemed like we became a product of our environment, and nowadays like all these sports exist, but it just doesn't seem like it has that same sort of energy as it once did. Just because I think it's existed and times have changed. But no, it's like we're really lucky to have had the parents we had because we never felt forced. And again, though, like how else were we going to spend our time on an island but go in the water? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of all we kind of just grew up in that environment.
You don't think that you don't think the next Kai Lenny is somewhere on Maui looking up to you like you did to Laird? Like you don't do you think that it's just in your mind because when you get older everything's like, oh, the surfers were always better when you were younger. This was always better. Like, I think it may be age and just experience and maybe a little bit of just getting older that you may not think that. I know what you mean, though, because the same thing.
I
I'm like, prone paddleboarding
Yeah.
is not like it used to be, or this is
Well,
not
I
like it used to be. But maybe it's because you're not because you're not in it. That it's not. That it's not like that. Maybe if you were the same age growing up and wanting to be like that, maybe it is. But I don't know. I just
Yeah,
it's
totally.
interesting.
I mean, I think just for clarity, it was just like I think it was more like they're just the events and then the
More
amount of
events.
people participating is I
Yeah.
guess what I would like lean on my experience as. And it's just it's life is ever changing, of course, and to a kid coming up now, they don't know any different and it probably seems so exciting and so fresh because it is to them. And I mean that being said, there's for sure kids that are coming up here now that are going to be much better than I am at this point because they have that advantage of like just like I did as a kid of seeing like, okay, this is the level, And as a kid, you don't know any better. You just assume that's the level you have to be at. There's no like kind of breaking through barriers to get to a certain point. And, someday for those kids, I believe it's going to be the same thing. The next generation is going to eclipse them. And I think that's the healthiest way to look at a sport, is if it's really surviving, is if there's always somebody that's getting better and faster. Just means there's a lot of interest in it still. But I mean, just to clarify before, we used to have all these prone paddleboard events. I guess we didn't have like the big wave of like the paddling event, but there was that one tow event one year. But then you had the King of the Air, you had all these windsurfing events, and there was just a lot of like, I don't know, it just seems like there was a lot of energy towards it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, look, like with the stand-up racing that we used to do, like there's no doubt about it that 7 to 8 years ago it was crazy. You could be a professional stand-up paddler, make good money, and the Battle of the Paddle and all that stuff was just like crazy crowds and money and sponsors and this and that. And you look now and you're like, it's just vaporized, and
and
it's sort of sad.
It's very sad because, like, gosh, but then it has me thinking, like, you have an event like Molokai to Oahu, and you have the same, like, core people, and it's almost, in the last couple of years, seen a more of a resurgence of prone paddleboarding. Like, there was an era where there was, like, prone paddleboarding didn't exist like it used to when you were racing, and it was more stand-up paddle focused. And then stand-up paddling kind of waned a little bit, and, it was kind of replaced by the foil. But again, the foil didn't totally take away like the same way, because there's only 5 of us or 6 of us doing it. And but then the prone community, it seemed like there was more. So it was like almost like back to its like grassroots underground vibe, like everyone there was competitive with each other and probably couldn't care less what like somebody outside of the sport thought. It was like everyone was competing against each other. And that just reminded me of when I was a kid doing like a team relay of that race. And that was the years you were dominating and winning all of them. But it's just like, it's funny how things sort of go into a cycle. So I'm interested to see if things will go into a cycle again with like the whole wind sports. But I think we're living in unprecedented times, and people's focus are probably a lot less on, what we were focusing on, like these sports. But then again, with COVID, it seems like there's more people getting outdoors. So who knows, really?
Yeah. And just before I blow past who is, like, let's speak of the young kids, up and comers, because I know I've been seeing a lot of that young Annie Starr. She seems like she's becoming a really well-rounded waterwoman.
Yep.
And give a shout out to any of the kids on Maui. Who are the kids that are impressing you these days, like sort of in that wind sports / big wave realm, that are trying to be the complete waterman?
Well, you know what? It's really cool to see that. And before I even like start dropping names, is a lot of these kids now are very interested in doing multiple sports, and it's not for any other reason that they're just trying to occupy their time being in the water with each other. And so it's really cool to see. I would say there's a more diverse crew of kids now than when I was coming up doing more sports. And a lot of it has to do with like accessibility and these sports already existing. But I mean, like Annie Reichardt, her middle name's Starr. It's like a family name. And
that's right, yeah.
And but she goes by Annie Starr. It's perfect because she's probably going to be a waterwoman star one day. It's just cool to see her progression as well. Like, she's really focused on getting her surfing dialed, but she wings every single day. She's learning how to kite. Obviously, she has great interest in big wave surfing. And, then, of course, Ty Simpson-Kane, who got into the big wave event at Peahi. The one thing I do love about having a big wave event here, or just any event in general that's like on a professional scale, is it really motivates the kids in the community here to like reach for something. They're not stuck on this island thinking like, all right, like one day I can leave the island to go do this event somewhere. It's like very accessible, tangible, and their family could be there. So like a kid like Ty, he's going to be one of the best Jaws surfers for sure. Give him time. And he's already had the advantage of like being around the best guys and getting into an event. And for me, when I got into an event out there, it really motivated me and brought clarity as to what I would have to do to be on that level. Like, it was just like being a part of that realm versus I'm trying to imagine it. And so you have those two, I would say they're kind of like, they're not the older crowd now, but they're like getting towards, 17, 18 years old. And then you have like this super young crew, and there's like funny, there's a pack of girls over here, like maybe like 8 or 10 girls that all want to surf jaws, but they're still like 11, 12 years old, and it's
Oh
just
my
so
God.
funny to see them go surfing, and you'll surf with them, and if you're not paying attention, they'll hustle you. Like if it's your
Yeah.
turn and you're not paying attention, they're gonna paddle around and go, because they're like, they're tunnel vision. I have a focus, I want to get better at surfing, and they're all getting into the wind sports as well. But it's just funny because every time I like question them, like I talk to them, I'm like, well, do you ever want to surf Jaws one day? Like just out of curiosity. They're like, yeah, we cannot wait. As soon as our parents will let us, we're going out there. And I'm like, they're surfing really good. They'll be able to do it when the time comes. Like they will
Yeah.
be knifing into these waves. And there could be like in who knows how long, 5, 10 years from now, pack of 10 young girls just charging and embarrassing a lot of the boys. But a lot of the kids that come down and through the summer have been doing a lot of downwinders and winging and stuff. This kid Otis Buckingham, he's like an up and coming kid. There's another bunch of kids nicknamed Gnarly Marley. Marley is this like super young kid. He looks like he's maybe 10, but he's like 13, 14 now. And it's just fun to see all these kids that are like definitely going to be, on that front line of big wave riding one day. And it's not like they're only focused on big wave riding. They're doing like a million other different sports. And it's not like they're only into foiling either. They're doing like prone downwinders, stand up downwinders. It's really cool. And I like hanging out with them because it just brings me back to why you would do it. It's just to
Yeah.
entertain and have fun.
Yeah. The Grom stoke just keeps the fire burning.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
and what's that? So what age were you, Kai, when I know for forever you can remember you've been down the beach and you started. I know you've done all the sports, started at a super young age and got really proficient really early. But when was it that it really clicked for you? Was there a moment like where you got to meet Laird for the first time, or Dave, or Robbie? Because I know you were sponsored by Nash for the longest time, and Robbie's like one of the most underrated watermen of all time, I believe. And obviously he was a
Agreed.
massive influence on you. And Dave, well, Dave's just such a legend. I mean, Dave's
Yeah.
accessible to everyone. He's so willing, such a great coach and mentor. And then you've got Laird, who's the alpha male. But obviously you just go, oh my God, it's Laird. You know what I mean? Like it's just like that's Laird Hamilton.
Yeah,
And you
totally.
had all and Rush Randall, who's super gnarly.
Yeah.
Super gnarly, underrated waterman. He lives out here in the North Shore. I see him every now and then. I mean, that guy's supremely talented, and a lot of people wouldn't even know who that guy was. So, I mean, Brett Lickle. I mean, the list goes on. You had so many amazing people, but I was just wondering if there was that one time where you just went home and just went, you know what, I want to be like these guys, like just from a certain moment in time.
I think it was really when I was just a tiny, tiny little kid. I mean, growing up here on the North Shore of Maui, those guys were all here and my parents knew them. And so it was like kind of meeting your superhero, like as if Superman existed, or the whole Justice League of superheroes were here. And to me, back in the day, it's funny because like nowadays, you have this comic book film rave where people are, kids really are inspired by these comic book characters. But to me, these guys were comic book characters. Like for me, what they were doing seemed unreal. Like it didn't seem like anybody could do it. And I thought maybe I could do it because I like know them. And by knowing them, it was really just like occasionally they'd say hi to me at the beach sort of thing. But then, I think when I did get older and I was showing like a progression, those guys were very genuine and very cool. And, I would say open to sharing their knowledge and stuff. I definitely think I remember it being more than maybe it even was, but that was just the impact that one person could have on a impressionable little kid. Is like one moment could stick with them and it could just kind of send them down a path of, that never existed before that moment. But I would say one of the most defining moments for me was just, I guess, being introduced to truly big waves was with Dave and Laird. And it was when Dave called me at 16 years old and told me that they were going to go foil out at Jaws. It wasn't a big day by any means. It might have been 12, 15 feet, but still bigger waves than I'd ever even dared go out to. And, I had such a high level of respect for those guys that I was waiting for a moment that they said it was okay to go out. Like I wouldn't dare go out there on my own and try to catch a wave if it wasn't with their permission. And I think that was like the right thing to do. And in hindsight, I just remember them saying, what do you want to do? Go out there for 2 years, or do you want to go out there for 30? And I kind of was always of the thought process that, I'd rather be out there for a long time. And, they always told me that, the waves existed forever. It's going to exist long before or long after you're gone. So don't rush it. And that's when I would take those baby steps. But I guess really breaking down to like how those individuals influenced me today or led me to that point, I think starting with Dave is probably, he's still doing really awesome stuff. And he's, I would say, doesn't care what anybody thinks about it. He'll occasionally share it on social media, but it's just the ultimate program I think you would want to be when you get to that age is,
he's
going.
sorry for cutting you off, but he's the ultimate grommet. Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
there's no bigger frother than Dave. Like, he's just like, he'll find a way to make things, cut things, slice them and dice them, and they might look kooky or whatever, but he don't give a shit, and he's having more fun than anyone.
Yeah, and usually the first versions of those toys he's working on are very unrefined, but
Like
then
the paddles. The paddles.
yeah, but he's always into the functionality. I think it's less
Yeah.
about maybe the style of it and the functionality. And I mean, if you look back at the history of his influence on surfing, uh, people 10, 20 years later all start copying what him and others were doing. And so I think Dave is like, I feel like Dave isn't as revered as a Hawaiian waterman as he should be, because he's probably one of the greatest watermen of Hawaiian lineage that has ever existed. I compared to anybody. I mean, 2 foot to 100 foot, in his time, he was, I think underrated. And then, you have like, I think somebody like Laird, who he had such an influence because he was like Superman. He had this aura around him. And he also, kind of like, without doing maybe the most high performance maneuvers, he commanded a lot of respect when he rode a big wave. Like it just looked like he was a part of it. Like it was, and when he was doing these incredible turns and stuff, but I feel like it was a lot had to do with the way he approached it. The energy he put out into the world was like, he just seemed like that's what a big wave surfer would look like if one was made for big wave surfing.
Yeah.
And then between him and Dave and the whole Strapped crew, those guys were constantly looking at ways to entertain themselves and innovate. And I mean, they were riding foils 20 years before foils became what it is today, which is like, a more common practice. And then, I think one of the most underrated dudes of all time for sure is Rush. I mean, he was doing maneuvers with straps that I'm just trying to replicate. And, I think the one tragedy of the whole Strapped crew is that they kind of existed in an era where there wasn't social media and they had to make their own movies and put it out, but they didn't. All the stuff they were doing, you couldn't put into like one video. Like it was a daily thing with those guys. And with Rush, he was probably doing aerial maneuvers that are only just being done now. And still, like you go to the North Shore and the guy will throw a 720 every time. He'll do his straps, but he'll do it inverted. He was closer to snowboarding on a surfboard than, just doing normal tricks. So Rush is somebody nowadays, especially, that I try to find any shred of footage on the internet to like be inspired by. And then of course, Robbie Nash, like, again, he's one of, like you said, one of the most underrated watermen of all time. And he was a very huge support for me since he had a company that served so many sports like windsurfing, kiting, sup, surfing, foils now. That he definitely was a huge reason why I kind of became who I am today. But I mean, then again, too, like I'm gonna bring it back to you, Jamie, is like when you would show up here for prone paddleboarding, I could just remember it was like the legend came to town. Like Jamie Mitchell, he won the Molokai like 8 times at that point, and he's gonna like probably win until he quits. And the craziest story I think I ever heard was when your board flew off the top of a roof and it broke in like three pieces, and then and you still won the on that board like three more Molokai titles. And it's like, what? That
Yeah.
no one can do that. It's Michael
That was
Phelps crap.
that was Dave. Dave gave me his little car, and we were driving, and I had three 18-foot boards on the roof of his little white Toyota Echo, I think it was, and we're driving down Hana Highway, and it was a windy day, and I'm driving, and I'm going past this like semi trailer, and I hear this, phoom.
Oh,
I look in the rear vision mirror, and I see not just the boards, the roof racks still attached to the boards, and they're floating in slow motion across the highway, missing cars, and somehow just land on the side of the road. I was just like, oh my god! Like I'm lucky I'm not in jail, number one, because I didn't kill someone from the boards going into someone's like windscreen. And
yeah.
then, long story short, we took him to Mark Rapors, Ding King. He fixed it. I wrote it that year, and that board was my magic board. And I kept writing it. I think I wrote it for another 2 years after it flew off the roof, But I think that's look, the beauty of that story, and what you was like. I had the same, like they had Laird and Dave and the strap crew, like gave me the hope of like there was something to do that wasn't just straight surfing or straight paddling or straight anything, because I lived in Australia, and the word waterman, even though there's some amazing like watermen in Australia, of course, but there wasn't an avenue for anyone to, like, I did surf club, I swam, I did the Ironman. Like those guys are amazing, like Pooley and all those guys, like they're incredible athletes. Matt Bevilacqua, who's won the last couple of Molokais, but like for me, I love surfing and I love paddling and everything else. And I remember getting the lead VHS tape and the strap VHS tape, and my roommate hated me. I just watched those movies over and over and over and over. I remember watching them with you at your house 10 years ago. I just was obsessed. I was obsessed with those guys. I wanted to be those guys. And in a way, that's such an amazing thing, because when people say that you can nearly manifest like your reality and manifest your dreams, like I feel I did. Like I was this nobody from Australia that came to Hawaii to do a paddleboard race and became really, really good friends with Dave. And I remember being on a photo shoot in San Francisco with Dave, and I'm like, hey, you want to go surf Mavericks? Like Mavericks is on. Like there's a swell coming. He's like, don't you just paddle? Like he didn't even know I surfed, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just, and anyway, like I remember getting a phone call too one day. I'm like, hey, I want to go to Jaws. Please, like I'll drive a jet ski, whatever. I don't even care if I have to surf, And I remember one day being on the North Shore, and I get a phone call, and he's like, hey, your number just came up. I'm like, what? He's like, get over here. And I was just like, yes. Like I was just so psyched. I was like a little kid, man. I was like, your ultimate heroes have just invited you to come along, and I think that's the beauty of what you're doing. I think that these kids get to see their hero, and anyone that's a hero in their life, and they see a good role model, and they're like, I can be like this. And even if you don't, you can strive to be the best that you can be, whether or not it's as good as Kai Lenny or Laird Hamilton or Dave Climb. It doesn't matter, but you set yourself goals, you strive to just get better, be a better person, healthy lifestyle, training, and it's such amazing to have those people for you, getting back to like, your progression of starting as a kid to where you are now.
I absolutely agree with you, Jamie. And I think trying to compare yourself or like beat other people is honestly pretty overrated. And that's something that I've just continued to learn as I've gotten older. It's just like, it's about setting your own personal goals and trying to achieve them. And it's really that journey of trying to get to that point. And I think it's really great when you could be inspired by somebody. And like, we were inspired by the Strap crew. For me, it's like, what can you continue to be inspired by? And if you're able to always have a goal in front of you, you're going to be able to live a full life. And by the end of it, be pretty satisfied with your experience. Because again, like being considered better than somebody else, it might feel good on the surface, but it's not something that lives with you when you really go home. You know, you're kind of back into your own world. And that's what I'm liking a lot about these young kids too, is they're very humble, and I think they're all supporting one another too. You know, like there was an era when I was competing in like stand-up paddling and all that, where it's just like you would just want to beat your friend so bad, it almost ruined your friendship. And I think a lot has changed with me. Like just in real example with big waves is that was a rivalry was really forming between me and Lucas. He's a Gooffoot, I'm a regular, similar in age, and we both like to tow, both like to paddle. And, you know, inevitably we ended up just teaming up. And I couldn't be more stoked when I just tow him into a giant wave. And he can't be more stoked when he tows me into a giant wave. And then when we're paddling, you know, it's like that having somebody that could really push you beyond your limits. You really do need somebody like that, I think, in your life. Like in some ways I've thought, oh, how much easier would it be if all these little rivalries in these sports, if those persons just didn't exist at that time, or if I was 2 years earlier. And then I think, well, I wouldn't be as good as I am today if I didn't have like somebody that I thought was way better, because I would want to try to rise to that. But I think there's a way to do that where you could like kind of just be inspired and, you know, not let the ego get in the way. And that's usually the most detrimental part, is when you kind of let it stop you.
Yeah, that's just maturity, you know, for sure. Just being older, and it's a good point, because you were obviously very talented, very lucky, had a ton of sponsors, right? And you, when you would tow, you would have specific guys that were able to tow you. You know, like you would turn up and it was, you know, Victor or Double D or whoever it may be, you know, because obviously you like to get a lot of waves and you can surf all day. You're fit, you know, like. So it's a really cool transition into actually like teaming up with Lucas, you know, because now you guys are potentially like a team, like, you know, like in reality, that's what teams were always used to be like, you know, like Dave and Laird, like they would go and maybe Dave would get the wave of the day that day and maybe Laird would get it the next day, you know, because it's 50-50, you don't know, you know, but you seem like for a while they had it on tap where you could just sort of just go all day. But what's it been like to actually sort of take a step back and like be like going, oh my God, like I'd like to be surfing right now, but now I've got to drive Lucas, you know what I mean? Like, has it been fun? Has it been frustrating a little bit? And like you're saying, just maturing and like going, you know what, like I don't need to so-called be the man every time and get the best wave, although we all want that, but it's fun to get your guy the best wave, because I saw how stoked he was when he got you that right at Nazaré.
Yeah. Oh, totally. You know, it was like, I think the difference is now it's like, it's really about sharing the experience is kind of what makes those certain sessions really the most powerful. For sure, like I want to ride as many waves as I possibly can, but I think what I did learn is that like I could get away with riding a little bit less, but I'll push harder on those fewer waves. And there is something nice about just taking a step back and going on the ski and towing a psycho in like Lucas, because this guy is just like full tilt, pedal to the metal. And I'll watch him and he'll just get me so fired up that when I get back on the rope, it's not like I go through that moment of feeling kind of flat, because if you do go all day, you can do an endurance race like that. But a lot of times there will be a lot of rides where you're just kind of riding as a ghost, you know, you're kind of just going through the motions. And I think you're not picking it apart because that opportunity is so accessible. And, you know, really it came about because of the Nazaré challenge and us towing together. We started practicing on swells before towing one another. And I just found that my performance was just getting better. And he was agreeing with me at the same way. It's like we were both pushing each other because we were allowing each other to get each other on the best waves, and then we'd watch intently and see what the guy was doing, be like, oh, that was insane, and then we would swap and it would be like, okay, I got to push it farther now. And in some ways I think we were inspiring one another, and we would spend all day in the water, maybe half the time I guess on the rope, but most of the time it was like, I think it was more focused time surfing, and I think that was like better. And you know, to be honest too, it's like you said, it's a lot of luck who gets the best wave. And when it's so satisfying driving somebody, even if he's like your greatest rival in your head, trying to get them on the best waves is like your only goal at the moment. And there's something almost more satisfying in getting somebody who really wants it a crazy wave than actually riding the wave yourself. And, when he got me that big right during the contest, like he had towed me into an earlier wave and we were towing back out and that wave just sort of appeared and it was underneath everybody. And it was like, all right, like, let's go. And then we were kind of having this conversation for a couple of seconds, like, should we go? Should we not go? It's in a weird spot. I don't know. And like, just go anyway. And then, I guess like through that experience, I just really knew what a good guy he was because he was genuinely stoked for me that I got that wave. And ever since then, I've been trying to pay him back with getting him the best possible, biggest wave as I could. And, I was stoked to see this last giant swell that he got one of the best lefts, maybe the best hollowest left of the day, because it was just like, yes, like, I'm stoked that one came for you. Because there was a lot of times where I'd be towing him and it just seemed like the waves weren't coming to us like they would when I was on the rope. It was just maybe the timing. And I was trying my best, like, all right, where's like trying to get you on the biggest wave, barreling wave possible. And, it's good to see when it comes together for your friend.
Yeah, for sure. And there is something about driving that's super fun and you learn a lot too. And I feel like without tow surfing being so popular the last, say, decade, I feel like a lot of the skills on driving a jet ski from some big wave surfers probably have just been lost in translation. With towing a partner, you got to learn how to go in, do the pickups and all that sort of stuff, and with the paddle revolution coming through so fast, like everyone was just paddling and there'd be specific guys doing rescue, so it's sort of nice. It's sort of nice when, if you go out there, you should probably know how to drive a jet ski, in my opinion, like in case something happens.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was that, the rebirth of paddle and surfing, or that resurgence where it was like paddle, 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 everything. Like, where are the limits? And there was like no limits for the longest time. And then, I think tow and surfing really, like we saw, kind of disappeared. But then it was like there was a little rebirth with tow surfing at, say, Nazare, because it was a place that required tow surfing in order to ride the biggest days. And then when paddling ended up going there, I think we were seeing kind of like a merging of two disciplines within big wave riding. And now I'm thinking more in the future that it's going to be a little bit heavier condition based, because you have guys like, Lucas Chumbo, who wants to do it all. He really doesn't care if he's paddling or towing. It's just condition dependent. And I'm on the same boat with him. Like, if it's great paddling, frick, let's paddle, because there's a huge challenge there. If it's good towing, let's just go tow. And maybe the wind comes up and you end up towing because of the wind. But I think Nazare Nazare kind of came in at the right time. And just thinking back on all the greatest moments in big wave surfing from the day, Greg Knoll caught his crazy wave at Makaha, it's pretty interesting to see whenever these transitional moments, they happen at the right time somehow. And it was like Shane catching his wave at, Jaws. And then it was like kind of exploring the biggest waves possible with you and Twiggy at, Belhara. And then it was like the paddling contest out at Nazare, and it was Garrett towing into a giant wave. And it was the slab era of people towing into chopes. And that was like what it was all about. It's just really interesting. Like, there's so much, I was Riding Giants came out in like 2003 or something, 2004. And just since then, there's probably just as much has happened since that, over that entire documentary, over that 50-year period that movie was based on. And it just seems like things continue to accelerate forward. So who knows where we're going to end up in 10 years? It's going to be exciting just to see.
Yeah, for sure. So continuing on the path, so did you homeschool as a kid? Did you go to school? Were you homeschooled or?
I did online school from high school on, but up until like 8th grade in America, I was like at normal school. And actually, some of my best friendships here on Maui kind of were forged in that. And I think, for a long time, I kind of like contemplated whether it was like the right thing to do to like not go to normal school, because you miss out on, I guess, that era of like development as a kid and meeting people and kind of going through like, I guess, the norms of a human being, or what a human being should. Like, there's a reason more than just the studying, but like the
Yeah.
social aspect. And it was all a willing sacrifice to end up where I am today. And the reason why I had to do it was because it was during a time where the schools on my wouldn't even allow me to travel like a week out of the entire year. And had they been a little more lenient like they are now, because I think they see the successes of pro athletes from the island, I think I could have gone and done both. But it's good to see, like, I'm actually pretty stoked when I see these young kids that are still doing school and then they're able to still travel. Like, they kind of have the best of both worlds. And I think that's really awesome. But like for the majority of when I was through high school, I was traveling 9 months of the year, and it was the best experience ever. And in hindsight, I wouldn't want to change a thing because a lot of my good friends were met on the road, and now I feel like I have a network of people around the globe that I could call at any point in time when I'm traveling, and have a hot meal and a warm bed if I really needed one.
Yeah. Yeah. So what age was it, Kai, then you like really, when you started to get sponsorship that were, obviously that you're like, wow, this is real now. I'm getting paid some money. This is really gonna be my path, and you're really gonna put everything into it. Like you must have sort of seen that in your teenage years, right? Because you were sponsored by
Yeah,
Quicksilver way back then. I remember when I met you and you were doing the paddleboard races, you were sponsored by Quicksilver.
yeah, I mean, totally. I remember, I mean, as a kid, I just didn't even care if I had anything but stickers on my board, like any
Yeah.
little kid would. You just wanted to mirror your idols, and Dave Kalama was pretty. He was the one that kind of hooked me up with Quicksilver in the beginning, and then Robbie Nash kind of like solidified that a little bit later on. But with Nash was probably my first true big sponsor, and that was at 9 years old. And then again, too, I think I was like a product of being in the right place at the right time. It was just like during an era where kite surfing was just blowing up, and I had ended up getting sponsored by kite surfing through my windsurfing and through kiting, of course. And it was because Red Bull had an event here called the King of the Air,
Mm.
and it was like the early years. And the way I got hooked up with them was actually when I was 12 years old. And I think it was because I was probably the only or one of the only young windsurfing kids who was sponsored by Nash, had Quicksilver logo on through Dave. And, I also was like one of the early kite kids. And so it was just like being in the right place at the right time. And in a way, knowing the right people or having the right people on my back, like, hey, like this kid's really cool, and like he's going to be good one day. That was, I think, mainly one of the reasons why I got pretty locked in. And then, I just always made sure when I was sponsored to over deliver. Like anything they requested, I tried to do twice as much. And being kind of an alternative surf athlete, I always felt like I had to over deliver because my strengths weren't ever in shortboarding, small waves, and competing in that
Yeah.
competition side. It was like, competing in other sports, but it wasn't, and I think a lot of these other sponsors like a Quicksilver were still at that era more very interested because of the influences of Dave and then influences of yourself who were on the Quicksilver team had. And then so I think it's hard for kids to necessarily get sponsored now just
Mm.
because it's, you know, like you have to kind of fit into a box a little more. But I kind of arrived when there wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily a box in my arena or what I did.
Yeah, timing's everything sometimes, and
Yeah.
it was a good time. So when did you fall in love with sort of the because we're going to get to the life of Kai real soon. So and your life has been well documented, but when did you sort of take a liking to like carrying a camera, making sure that everything was being filmed and you're getting clips and that when did that really kick in for you? Because you've been doing it for a long time.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. So my deal with Red Bull when I was 12 is I wasn't getting paid, but I got given a HD camera. And the part of my deal was like they wanted to create a database of me as a kid growing up, basically. So that one day when I was maybe 18 or 19, that there would be an archive. And so they basically would like, I guess, support me on my trips and like on equipment and all that by buying back my footage that I filmed. And so I got really into filming that way. And then also I just have always been into like film as well. Like I love filmmaking, just like storytelling. There's nothing better than when you can sit down with somebody and hear an amazing story. And I've always been a visual learner, so seeing something visually always caught my eye. And combining storytelling with visuals was always very enticing. And then for me too is like I feel like I always wanted to sort of share how I did things, but while I shared how I did them, have people just like see the good, the bad, and whatever. And I feel like a lot of times it's always been positive, and it's because a lot of the projects I've done haven't necessarily been in control. And I'm like, well, with the Life of Kai series, I do want to show kind of like that mental struggle a little bit with like, how I transitioned from the beginning of the season to the end. And it was all through just changing a mindset and, not necessarily winning something that I could have won, not necessarily getting the wave of the day, but not letting it be my hang up. And then, instead of being kind of like separated or I guess when you were younger and competing, you didn't want to like give away all your cards, not like necessarily hanging out with your peers as much. It kind of flipped it to the end of the season where I'm like with one of my rivals, Lucas, and we become best friends, and we're just excited to see each other push it. And inevitably you end up getting what you want that way better, because you're not like trying to control anything. You're just letting things happen as they come. And that hard work sort of pays off, because you've let go. And I always remember Kelly Slater's movie Letting Go. As soon as you let go of like having all control, usually things start to work out the way you envision them. And so
Yeah.
I've been trying to kind of like do whatever I can to do the best I possibly can. And if it works out, great. But if it's not, I'm just going to keep chugging on forward.
Yeah, because I remember back when you were heavily in the stand-up racing, you had the series Positively Kai, right? That was one that you did.
Yeah.
And then you've done the Sup movie. I think that's what it was called, right? You did the Sup movie, which was all about your stand-up surfing, racing, big waves, and then I'm gonna butcher this. Is it Paradigm Lost? Is that how?
Yes, nailed it.
I nailed it. Yes. So and that was sort of like a little bit of a feature film as well. And then you've got your. I love the name of 20 at 20. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, very few people understood that, but I was like, anybody that knows what that means.
Yeah.
I was always thinking if I did that vlog, I wanted to end it. If I was going to end it, it would have to be on a 20 at 20 swell.
Yeah.
And then, kind of took a break from it just now for the Life of Kai series, but
yeah. And so take all those little projects you've done, the Positively Kai and the movies that you've done, and now obviously it seems like Red Bull's got right behind this the Life of Kai series and season 1. So I'm guessing there's going to be multiple seasons.
Yeah. Fortunately, yes.
What have you learned? Like, what did you learn? Like, what did you take out of all those other projects? And because I think it's, for me personally, like if I'm watching I want to see a bit of the struggle. Like the Kai Lenny thing is it seems very perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
It's like Kai's sponsored since he's 10. He's got everything given. I'm not saying given to him, but you've worked your ass off. But
it looks like it for sure.
When you look at it, it looks like this. Someone might go, "Fuck, man, this guy's perfect. I don't even want to care anymore." You know what I mean? But
yeah, totally.
So for me, it's been good to see a little bit of the struggle, and just a little bit different side of Kai Lenny, because I think as kids growing up, we all know that nothing's perfect. No one's perfect. Nothing's perfect. Life's not perfect. We all have our struggles. So I think it's good that, you've matured enough. You're at an age where you're like, hey, I can start to show more of myself. I can start to show more of my personality maybe, and just what life is in general for you, because I think that's important,
Yeah, I agree. Totally. And a lot of these projects too, when they did come up, it was ways just to like get my name out and, I guess share what I'm doing. And the only things I knew how to share were what I was doing. And of course you'd want to make yourself look the best way possible. And, sometimes I think it's like, if we're doing a project, a lot of times if either directors or people that are producing it don't know me, they want to do the same, like, oh, the beginning. And because they're like, they're maybe not a part of that world as much. And I'm like, gosh, I just feel like it's been rehashed so much. I'm like bored of talking about it. I want to show like what's happening now, and I want to just show like how I'm changing through these experiences, because one of the biggest concerns I had when I was a kid coming up was like that transition from being, I guess, a child star to like, a top level professional athlete, but one that's like could last the length of time. Like the people that are in their 50s that are still doing their thing and still revered as great athletes. That's always my goal. And so I thought on this series, and I tried to incorporate it the best I could. And I thought the people that I worked with at Indigenous Films and Red Bull Media House, they pulled it together. Was just like, you know what, just like show how it was like not always super psyched, and like how there's like kind of, the hurry up and wait gets under my nerves, or
Yeah.
just like anything that anybody would normally go through. And I guess my hope is in the future is to continue having these stories of myself, if there's a lesson in there that somebody can learn to like avoid, because I'm just figuring out as I go as well. It's like, oh, like if I'm going on this kind of path that Kai has been on, here's some clear signs of like where, you can avoid a little bit of trouble, and then you could like, go as far as you can. And then eventually, I think as an individuals, we always come into our own speed bumps for sure. But it's just how you overcome it. And so, no, I mean, like a lot of these projects, I just love filmmaking. I love being around the camera, because it's like capturing cool things gets me excited. It's not necessarily capturing me, but the easiest way to capture anything would be around me, because I could be like, oh, I could do this, and we could get it on film, and it might look really cool. And then again too, it's like it's just getting my name out there. And in a way, like being a professional athlete is a little bit like survival. You're always having to try to figure out how to make yourself relevant.
Yeah.
And you can either do it through competition, but in the COVID era, competition doesn't really exist. So it's like, how do you get to do what you get to do? And in a perfect world, all I would want to do is just go out and do what I'm doing, and could care less about maybe capturing it. But I do enjoy, people talking to me about it. And a lot of people have some great ideas for stuff that I'm doing. So that's good.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so what, where is big wave surfing headed in your opinion, Kai? I mean, you're at the forefront of it, guys like you and Lucas, and there's a bunch of other people. But what's in your mind? Where do you see it in the next 5 years?
I think we're kind of on a trajectory with where it's just like very progression based. I think the limits of like how big of a wave you can paddle in, like I think everyone's going to be trying to still catch the biggest waves that are paddled in, but I think we're limited by those days. You don't always get that perfect opportunity. And who knows if I'll see a day like that Aaron Gold 2016 swell that we were a part of. Like, you just never know. You'd like to think so, but how soon? That's anyone's guess. For me, my personal vision, and I think it's in line with Lucas since I've been towing with him, is we just want to do high performance things on big waves. And I think with paddling, it might mean starting to ride smaller and smaller boards. And someone like Albie Lair has already been pushing that for many years. But it's like, the risk goes up when you have to ride a smaller board and you have to sit farther inside. And can you catch as big of a wave? Sure, you just got to be farther inside, and you might just pay the ultimate price for it. So I envision like my paddle and surfing being more turn maneuvers, longer barrels, of course, and just trying to ride bigger waves. And then when it comes to tow and surfing, I just want to do snowboarding style maneuvers on big waves. Catching the biggest wave ever ridden, that's cool. Like if I could catch one of those, and that's why I go to like a place like Nazare, or I'm on call with Jaws, but it's not my motivation for big wave surfing. I'd rather just catch a bunch of big waves, but do really like scary big maneuvers that, keep the adrenaline flowing. And if I kick out and I don't do like, say, even a simple 360, I'd find myself maybe disappointed, only because that's what I've sort of set myself up as success in my path, and I think everyone has a different approach in big wave riding. And a lot of times, like I just get inspired by it. I'm like, gosh, the way that person's sitting over there to paddle into this wave, that's cool. I want to do that. Or the way they're just drawing a line on a big wave.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll ever, on some of the biggest, baddest waves, all you're going to be able to do is ride it the best way possible. Is going to be like dropping in and setting yourself up and getting in the barrel, similar to like what Shane has done, what Ian Walsh has done, what yourself has done. Like, there are certain waves. There's just, you can't do anything more than you're probably already doing unless
Yeah.
you were towed in. But I don't know. I just want to ride a ton of big waves. That's the progression I see, though, is
Yeah.
like for me.
Yeah, that's cool. It's awesome. And then I love the way that the promo was cut for the life of Kai. That question that you, and the way that you answer it. Like, so what is the goal? And you were really like, focus and into the cameras, like, well, it's to be the best big wave rider ever. And was
Yeah.
that something to just like, it seemed very poignant to like put that out there as the first thing, and is that something that you feel like that holds you accountable, like to makes you focus, now that it's out there that you've just said that, or is it just something that you drive deep within, that's just what I want to do, and I'm going to do everything it takes to do it,
Well, I didn't even know they were going to put that in the beginning. When I first saw it, I was like, oh gosh, like I just remember in that interview, which was just right here in my boardroom, for me, I always wanted to be the best big wave rider. I wanted to
Yeah.
be, because I watched Laird and I watched Dave and I watched Rush and all these, the strapped crew. And I figured, when their time was up, I wanted to be them. And so, and part of the way of being honest in a show, I feel like, I could have shown like maybe more humility, where I've been like, well, I just want to be one of the best big wave riders. But
No,
I mean, that was
that's
never been my goal.
That's what coming back to. That's what was real. Like you could have went back to the old Kai and said, I could be one, but you are open and honest, and I like it. That's what I like about the life of Kai, because you're putting it out there, and you're not it's not being cocky. It's just like, of course you want to be the best. If you asked me 10 years ago about paddleboarding, it's like, of course I want to be the best. Like, am I going to be the best? Like, I don't know, but am I going to give it 100%? Of course I'm going to, but you can be very confident and cocky without being an asshole. You know what I mean? Like there's ways around. You can be super competitive. You can be the most competitive person in the world, but still shake someone's hand when they beat you. You know what I mean? There's ways to go about it to do that, and I liked it. When I saw that, I was like, right on, Kai. Like I'm glad that you come out and said that. That was awesome.
Well, too, it felt like something to get off the chest as well. It's just like, I mean, I thought about it and I'm like, well, how would people like interpret that? Like, oh, what a little dick, like why would you, like, you think you're better than everyone else? But then I thought about it, I'm like, all the people that I get to surf with, they all want to do the same thing. Like I promise, if you asked a lot of the other individuals in big wave surfing, of course they'd want to be the best, the greatest. And but I think what that allows us to do is just to like let go and give the best hand. And if at the end of the day, if somebody's better, at least I know I gave it my absolute all. And to be honest, I won't be the best I could possibly be if there weren't other people out there that wanted to be better than me or were better than me, in fact. So I think like it was just, I think it's really good to state your intentions, especially in a world of a little bit of deception. With social media, you can make yourself look however you want. And I definitely feel like I show mostly the positive of what is going on. And that's like just, I think, with anybody's approach. But yeah, even in season 2, like I really just want to show, who, like, yeah, I'm not perfect by any means, and I don't pretend to be, or I try to like be a lot more honest nowadays than I have ever been. So yeah, that question too is just like, you know what, I've always wanted to be, so
yeah,
this is the truth. I
Here
don't know
it
if I
is.
ever will be, but this is it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's awesome. And so just a couple last questions. So if you could tell the young kids coming up that want to be the next Kai Lenny, like what advice would you give them? What's a couple of pieces of advice that you've learned along the way, or that you didn't do or did do, that you would give these kids to give them the best opportunity to live their dream?
Well, I think number one would be come talk to me immediately, just because if they had a specific question, I would love to like, give them my insight. Cause I really, every opportunity I get, and I get it that like there was people older than me, and I tried to be very like observant and absorb whatever somebody said. But I do feel like, gosh, there's things I've learned that will like save you 2 years of trying to get better in big waves. But then I understand too, you have to kind of go through stuff like as your own experience. Like you need that time and experience to learn on your own to truly understand it. Like being told something doesn't really count. But I would say most importantly is don't take everything so seriously. Obviously take things seriously and be on time for if you're gonna have a meeting with a sponsor, or just be on time in general with anything. And then always over deliver. But I think most importantly, don't get like too focused, like this is your whole world. And I think when I was younger, I was too focused on trying to have control of making everything work. And I think you're going to be able to go farther faster when you're able to separate the two, like a light switch. You go into competition, you go into that competition mode, and then afterwards you're able to basically let go of that ego, and you could hang and you could be around the people you just compete against. And it's not a weakness to be like that. I think
Yep.
sometimes it could be perceived as that, but it's a strength because you're so strong. It doesn't matter what anybody could say to you. It wouldn't even affect you. And that's from just letting go and being comfortable with yourself, kind of learning to love yourself since you're stuck with yourself the rest of this life. I think, and not being too overly analytical on everything that you do. If you have a bad session, it's like, all right, I had a bad session. Like, I'll just go
Yeah.
try again the next time.
It's
Whereas
like
before, like sometimes I might get too wrapped up, like I just blew that big wave session. I didn't go for that wave. I pulled back. And nowadays, if I pull back on a wave, I'm like, oh, maybe I could have gone. All right, the next opportunity, I'm gonna just go for it, and then you go for it. But it's like, I think, yeah, I would say that's my greatest advice, is just to really like let go a little bit more. Stay focused, of course, but try to just like be a good person first, of course.
Well, you heard it. You heard it, kids. When you see Kai Lenny, run up and ask him a question.
Yes, if I can help, I'll try.
All right, Kai. I'm finish up the podcast with 5 questions, and I know I probably know
Okay.
a bunch of your answers already. But the best big wave in the world.
For me, Jaws. It's
Sure.
just backdoor, and it's in my backyard.
Yeah.
I love all the other big waves, but if I had to choose one, Jaws.
Yeah. Heaviest / scariest big wave in the world.
It's the scariest big wave to me is the one I haven't had the most experience at, for sure. Just because that the unknown. Real quick, like Nazare, when I the first time I had ever gone was the first Nazare challenge, the paddle event. And I remember being so grateful I lived through that, because it just seemed so crazy and out of control. And I thought I would never come back. But I knew in my heart that I would. And now that I've spent enough seasons there, I've gotten more comfortable, though I still respect it immensely. It's typically the place that I have spent the least amount that terrifies me, because I haven't gone through it. But I mean, I guess getting caught inside at the peak at Jaws in a barreling 80-foot wave, I don't know. That one still is probably that's hard to beat. That one is, I've had nightmares over that.
Yeah, for sure. The most underrated big wave in the world.
The most underrated big wave. That's a great question. I don't know. That's really hard. I guess my mind's always been wrapped up in like the 3 big ones, which is like the Jaws and the Mavericks and the Nazare. Like if I was to like pick a triangle of waves to go to, I still think like maybe there's waves on the North Shore, like Waimea Bay. Waimea in some way has been forgotten as one of the gnarliest, but I just remembered when I was trying to get into the eddy as an alternate and skipping out on a big Jaws day and watching massive Waimea close out, and all you guys were out there just sending it, and the skis had to come in. I'm like, dude, you know what? Like, Waimea's like super gnarly. And
Yeah.
I knew personally when I went out in that morning trying to like maybe make a point that I should be in the event, and I took off behind Ian Walsh, and I can remember being too late and purling and getting super, super pounded, like to the bottom, super deep, ears ringing. And I think part of the reason why I got so pounded is because I was like, oh no, I'm used to Jaws. It can't be as bad,
Yeah.
And then I was like, frick, this wave pound for pound is still like I put it still on a top tier list up here. So
Yeah.
like that big Waimea day, like I don't think people like revere that wave as much as they should.
Yeah. Good answer. What's one big wave you haven't surfed yet that you want to surf?
I really want to go and surf Shipsterns. I
Hmm.
really want to go down there and do that wave just because it's a right. There's a ledge, so I can like do a chop hop down the wave. And then it's a big barrel, of course. The only thing is it's freezing, and not knowing that wave very well is pretty scary. And another wave is like, I guess, it's always the waves that I haven't spent the most time at that I'm the most scared that I want to go to. And it's these slab waves. I haven't spent that much time on these huge slabs. So even like at Chokes, I've been out there when it's 12 to 15 feet and paddling, but have gotten pounded a little bit by that. But I haven't been up there when it's like 25-foot tow and you just see these huge slab waves. I'm like, gosh, I gotta do it because I haven't done it. And I
Yeah.
know I'll be terrified up to that point. But then by the end, I'll have been I'll either be dead or I'll have really loved it.
Yeah. Well, I think you really love Shipsterns, and I think that the guys like Mikey Brannan down there has always wanted to go over that step and then do that 360 twist that you've been doing at Nazare, right? And at Jaws
Yeah.
now. So I still think that's like when I see that chop hop, I'm like, is there a way to chop hop, do that 360 land and then go? So maybe that's the next progression down there.
Yeah, I was planning on going this summer, but then COVID hit, and then it was just like, oh, can't go. So
Yeah.
maybe next year.
Yeah. Wow. All right. And the final question is, if where's the next big wave discovery? Do you think? Nazare came along and just was not there, and all of a sudden it's just giant. Like, where do you think that next spot, that place is?
That's a good question. I always think about that scenario, how like it was only really in 2011 that everyone figured out that Nazare was this crazy big wave, and it was like in Europe, like a westernized country that, the one of the biggest waves on the planet was in plain sight, not even that far away from Lisbon, and it was like next to a harbor. Like that's the best setup in the history of big waves. Like I don't know anywhere else. Maybe Mavericks is just as close too,
Yeah.
but like it's even easier at Nazareth. You just go straight out and you're there.
Yeah.
I've been trying to think about it. I know like maybe individuals like yourself, but like Greg Long and Ian Walsh, they know where the next one is, I think. And I've been trying to like pick their brains, like, so like next trip, just call me up.
Yeah.
But then, I think it's like maybe it is in some very obvious places, but maybe those obvious places require special storms. And I do remember seeing like a giant, like a giant hurricane that missed New York and sent giant waves to like Nova Scotia, for example. It was pretty stormy. It kind of resembled Nazare, but the waves looked like 70 feet. And I was just like, gosh, you just got to be at the right place, at the right time. I don't know. I think Africa, honestly, has a lot of hidden gems.
Yeah.
Just Africa in general. When I went down there to surf Namibia a couple years ago, I just realized truly how big that place was. And I thought to myself, if someone's going to find it, it's probably Twiggy, and he's probably already found it. But there has to be some nuts big waves down there, because just think about that untouched coastline. I mean, we just drove only a couple hours down the way, and we were finding little beach break waves. I'm like, there's just no reason why there isn't one down here. I just can't imagine why there wouldn't be. Maybe even South America. There's big waves in South America, like on the Pacific side, but I always wondered about like Argentina or something. Like, is there something down there sneaky, like those big storms that come off of, Cape Horn Cape Horn and come around and just whack into that area? I got to start going on Google Earth.
Well, Kai Lenny, thank you so much, brother. And
thanks, Jamie.
Why don't you give the Life of Kai a promo? Tell us when, where, how we can find it, where to access it.
Yeah, so you guys can watch Life of Kai on Red Bull TV. There's 5 episodes streaming for free. You can binge watch it. It'll be slowly coming out on YouTube if you miss it on Red Bull TV. But I guess the whole story of my big wave season last year, and we're going to start filming season 2 here soon. Hopefully we get a ton of big waves, and could take everyone on some of my adventures and the experiences that I go through to get there.
Awesome, mate. Well, good luck this season. Hope to see you out in the water at some stage. And
Hope so.
Thanks for being on the podcast.